Boycotting goods from questionable regimes and human rights abusers may soon become illegal in the United Kingdom. The UK government announced a crackdown on local councils, public bodies and even some university student unions from boycotting unethical companies and goods from questionable regimes. Many fear that this is in direct response to the global success of the BDS movement. The BDS campaign seeks to raise awareness of Israeli government-sponsored atrocities by boycotting products and services procured or headquartered in Israel. An example where the boycott is in place includes Leicester City Council. In 2004, they passed a policy of boycotting all goods produced from Israeli-occupied territories in the West Bank. The Scottish government also issued a procurement notice to all local councils, which strongly discourages trade and investment from illegal settlements. Some critics say the ban amounts to a gross attack on democratic freedoms. This includes the opposition to the government. A spokesman for Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn said this government's ban would have outlawed the council action against apartheid South Africa. Ministers talk about devolution, but in practice they're imposing conservative policies on elected councils across the country.
Now, joining me to discuss that last story on the Middle East is Shazia Arshad, who's a Middle East analyst, Hugh Lanning from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and Alexei Sayle, who's a comedian and political commentator. Welcome to the programme, all of you. Alexei, this government rule change that publicly funded bodies won't be allowed to choose who they should buy their services from. I mean, if it weren't serious, it'd be fresh material for a comedy routine, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is laughable in some ways, and I think there is some doubt about how it can possibly be enforced. But you know, I mean, as a leading campaigner for a boycott and stuff, it's just you just wonder what they're afraid of, really, just to not allow. You know, I mean, what the boycott movement is entirely peaceful. It's just urging people to. You know, to think about, or organizations think about not buying Israeli products, or indeed not buying products of other organizations, companies that they disagree with. It's an entirely peaceful protest, and I can't understand for the life of me why they should try and stop it happening, you know.
I mean, it's pretty clear who it's mainly aimed at. I mean, it's a pretty catch-all change in the law that will hit a number of campaigns targeting goods for a number of reasons. But with the minister responsible making the announcement in Israel itself on a visit, it's pretty clear that they're after BDS, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it is that they find it. You know, it's just that they can't stand any kind of criticism. They can't stand any kind of, any kind of activity against them. I keep reiterating, it's peaceful. It's, you know, it should be within people's right to withdraw their money to not buy the services of Veolia or G4S, but they cannot stand because they cannot stand this mild level of activity against them. And the reason is because I think deep down they know how wrong and how wicked their activities are, and they hope to get away with their evil, with the terrible things that they do forever, really. And it's it's counterproductive. I think in the end, protest will find a way to work against them, I think. But yeah, it's both Israel, but it's also their friends in the arms trade as well.
Shazia, it's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Because the Tory government on practically every other day of the week goes on about consumer choice, but not this case.
Yeah, this is definitely taking away consumer choice, and it's a lot of campaign groups have been calling it an attack on local democracy, and I think that's certainly what it is. And it's kind of the Tory government trying to make sure that they get their policies in very strongly wherever they see fit. And I think it's also, it's a sign that actually the boycott movement has been quite successful.
Hugh Lanning, I mean, that's true, isn't it? In a way, it's a kind of backhanded compliment to the BDS movement, because we know that the Israeli government is very concerned about it, about the profile that the Israeli government has internationally. They worry about the United Kingdom. So all this is a response to that by the Tory government, isn't it?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, really, that it is, in a way, a compliment, but it's also deeply worrying. I mean, we were thinking something like this was coming, but when you see the regulations, they're so widely spread, so they're even protecting the right for people not to invest in the illegal settlements or not to have their... So even though the Foreign Office says the settlements are a barrier to peace, and these are big towns and cities they're building. You know, they control 40% of the occupied land of Palestine. And now the government is saying you have to invest in illegal companies and corporations that operate in these areas. It's totally bizarre. And I think, you know, making the announcement in Israel is the giveaway, you know. Going to Israel to tell local councils and British pension funds what to do, I think, says what the driving force is.
There seems to be one loophole, which is this something that the government haven't really thought through, because their own decisions about ethical and unethical purchases aren't covered by this, if I have the information correctly.
That's right. They're saying if the government says it's unethical, it's okay to ban or boycott or not to do it. But if other people think it's unethical, then you can't. It has to have the stamp of the government to approve it, which is a bit strange because, you know, the breaches that we claim about for Israel are breaches of international law. This is the UN that has said this in terms of, say, the settlement. And actually the UK's British guidance to business is based on the UN principles, and they're disciplining them, really. They're effectively saying that there's no rules that apply to Israel. It's got a free reign to run and do whatever it likes, and we will never challenge it in any shape or form.
I mean, Alexei, putting aside what we might think about the issue, the Palestinian cause in itself, this is a deeply undemocratic judgment, because not only will there be local councils, but it's rumoured at any rate that student unions won't even be able to take these kind of decisions. So there's something fundamentally undemocratic against the whole cast of this, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, those 5 years that they spent in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, you didn't realise just what an intensely ideological and intensely reactionary organisation the Conservative Party is these days. And I think now you're seeing, you know, with so many decisions, but with this particularly, you're seeing the kind of naked reactionary nature of them, highly ideological and, you know, highly committed to, you know, aiding the forces of, you know, of negativity in the world in a way. You know, you're seeing them for really what they are, you know, stripped of the kind of veneer that the Liberal Democrats gave them for 5 years, I think.
Shazia, do you think that campaigners or bodies that support the BDS movement will continue to run the boycott and therefore face the possibility of being prosecuted?
I mean, I think there's still there is also time now to challenge this. And I know that some organisations are still calling for people who are concerned about this current legislation to write in, and organisations are looking to present their findings to the government. So I don't think the fight is over. And I think that, you know, the BDS movement has been going for a long time now, and it's actually only gotten stronger. So I don't think that people are going to be willing to give up without a fight. I know that organisations such as War on Want have called on their members to submit representations, and I suspect that actually what will happen is more and more organisations and more people, and I don't think it will just be the BDS in relation to Israel, but I reckon groups who work in the arms trade and other sorts of, I mean, there's a number of groups that are being affected by this new proposal, so I expect a lot of people will be opposing it.
Hugh, tell us what you think the reaction of campaigners will be around this. Do you think we're going to end up seeing local authorities, student unions breaking the law?
The position of student unions is unclear. I think it will generate support for Palestine amongst students, which is already growing greatly with the NUS adopting a pro-Palestine position. And certainly we've found support for the PSD growing. So I think it's going to have the reverse effect of the one that they want, trying to muzzle people and stop people campaigning for what they think is right. I think will make people want to campaign even more loudly. So I mean, I think they've shot themselves in the foot. But it is a worrying trend that they think they can get away with, just take away people's democratic rights in this country to protest and campaign like we've done for decades.
Alexei, do you think that's true, that the BDS movement is now so deeply and widely embedded that the reaction to it is likely in the long term to strengthen the movement rather than the government getting its way?
I would certainly hope so, and of course, one of the great, Britain is a leader in the BDS movement, and I think hopefully it will take a lot more than this kind of idiocy to put a stop to that.
So, in your kind of work as a BDS campaigner, do you agree with what Hugh was saying? Because this is the sort of sensation I think that many people get, that in the last perhaps 5 to 10 years, this has taken root in a way that, well, perhaps nobody quite foresaw when BDS began.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's it's been remarkable how, I mean, it's obviously one of the reasons we talk about boycott is to draw that parallel with apartheid in South Africa. But it's very heartening, I think, to see how it's particularly caught on in Britain, and that's why they hate it. That's why they're conniving. Friends of Israel are conniving to try and stop it, because they can't stand it, because it makes it very clear to people in a simple way what Israel is, and it also highlights, the West tries to talk about, there are, the tolerance in our societies and all that stuff, but as long as we allow this hypocrisy, as long as, like he said, we essentially say to the Israelis that they can do anything that they want, perform any illegal act, and people who are campaigning against them won't be allowed to campaign. As long as we allow that hypocrisy, then it's going to make us look no better than, the people we decry as our enemies.
Shazia, just on the strategy of campaigning now, would you be expecting Palestine campaigners now to be looking around for perhaps allies that wouldn't naturally be drawn into this kind of discussion? I mean, this is legislation that, for instance, may affect people who want to buy fair trade coffee, for instance.
Yeah, I suspect that actually what it will force campaigners to do is to come together in a much broader way, because, as you said, it's going to bring together all sorts of different types of organisations, not just focused on things like the arms trade in Palestine, but the ethical fair trade movement's been a big one, and there's been a lot of concern about some of the goods and services that have been available by local councils, and there's been a real movement by some organisations and some charities to change the way that councils run when they're kind of, procuring certain services. And I think what we'll see is campaigners being forced to come together to try and combat what's going on here.
OK. Shazia Arshad and Hugh Lanning and Alexei Sayle, thanks very much for joining me for that discussion, but I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there.